everyone, welcome to Watch It Paint It. Today we're going to be painting a roaming monster, the Hydra Troll from Massive Darkness by Simon Games. We're going to start with this mini primed in matte black by the Army Painter. So that's just their normal matte black spray, done that outside, not inhaling any of that garbage aerosol. So after that we're going to move on to base coating, and we're going to start with Barbarian Fesh. That's the skin colour from the Army Painter, and we're going to be doing his chest, his back, his arms, his hands, his legs, and his feet, and his face. Don't forget his face. So some of you eagle-eyed viewers out there might recognise that's not my setup, and that's not Benson's setup. So today we're joined with a special guest. This is Austin, the Game Warrior. He has his own painting channel. I think he's very good at painting, and he's got very, very high production tutorials. So I'll link to his channel in the description below if you want to check it out. And if you do enjoy this video, do give him a thumbs up below, and we'll see if we can pinch him more often. I think more content on this channel is always a good thing, right? So we're just watching him. He's using his regiment brush there and just painting in all of this skin. It's quite a large model, so it's very, very easy to hit the right places with a larger brush. I think myself, I might even be tempted to use my monster brush at this point, just because I think this would have been so easy to paint. So we're watching him apply the first coat here, really, and off camera he did another coat, which I'm not going to show. It's just exactly the same, but after the second coat's done he looks a lot more like this, and straight away he's looking like a high troll. I think that's not looking bad. Pretty accurate is Austin with his paint jobs. Next he's going to use Ash Grey by the Army Painter, and this is for all of the hair and fur on this model. So that's his hair running down to his back, his beard on the front, and he's got a little belly tuft, a happy trail. And you just want to be covering this with a nice even light coating. So water this paint down probably about 25% to 50%. I'm not quite sure what Austin used, but that's about what I would be doing at this point. And then yeah, we're just going to be using a large brush again, this regiment brush here. And I guess that's a benefit of using a black primer at the start. I very rarely start with a black, but I guess it has the opposite effect of a white. But I always think if you miss a little bit in the crevices, like we often do when we're painting, it does add to it being a sort of a shade, shadow in those missed bits between two coloured areas. So I guess that's a benefit, but I can see here Austin doesn't miss any little bits, and that's very accurate. Next up is Combat Fatigues. This is one of Army Painter's dull / beigey / light greens, and he's going to be painting the skirt of this high troll in that. So same brush, same consistency of paint, just applying a couple of thin layers to this whole skirt area. There's quite a lot of this. This is one of the larger parts. So far, well, this is the last large part of this model, so it's only really skin, fur, skirt, and then some details really. The next parts are a lot quicker than this, so he's just being extra careful around there not to catch any on the skin, which he's painted the colour he wants. So we're just going to time travel a little bit there and move on to Boney Spikes, and this is for his horns. So I'm just going to show you here, front and back, all the way around, both horns, all the way down to his head, his skull, and that's the Boney Spikes done. So we'll move on to next skeleton bone. A similar colour, this one's a bit lighter, more beigey. The skeleton, the Boney Spikes is more of a yellowy beige. This is more of a whitey beige. And this is for the skulls on his waistband there. So he's got a couple on each side. Next up is Leather Brown, again by the Army Painter, and this is to paint in the High Troll's club. So he's just painting under the hand and then above the hand, just dodging those straps. I think you could very easily just paint those straps and then darken them up with a different brown afterwards, but I guess it adds to keeping like a higher level of detail if you're not building up a bunch of unnecessary paint. So Austin's probably right here in not painting them, but I certainly wouldn't be taking time and effort in here. I wouldn't mind if I get it a little bit brown, because I'm going to be painting a different brown in a few minutes time. He's also going to be painting a couple of these little bags that are on the High Troll's back. Obviously we can't see what they are in the art, but they're going to be brown. Bags are brown, right? But as soon as I said that, he's switching to Mouldy Clothes. This is one of Army Painter's brighter greens, and he's painting in that pouch on the High Troll's back. It's just to add some variety in those bags. Monster Brown's next, and this is a lighter brown. I don't actually own this one. I presume the Leather Brown that he used before is the same as the Zombicide kit set. So I'm not sure exactly what this is. I'd just be mixing in some white with my leather brown to achieve this colour. And so he painted the straps of the club with this one, and he's also just going to paint a couple more of those bags on his back just to add some variety in the browns. It'll just look a lot more realistic, a lot more interesting looking at this model from behind. I spend a lot of time watching it from behind as my character runs backwards across the board, being chased by these huge roaming monsters. Oozing Purple is the next variety on the bags, and Austin's just going to paint a couple of these bags on his back just with an Oozing Purple. Again, just at this point, there's no art for this. You guys can do whatever you want, whatever colours you fancy. Just add some variety, make it a little bit more interesting, just for your own tastes, really. Just giving you a quick show of how the model's looking so far. Next colour is Plate Mail Metal by the Army Painter. This is their metallic light silver, and this is just a paint on that spike that's at the end of his club. I guess that's why it's a spiked club, and then some studs. Some studding that's running through his club as well. I switched down to the detail brush for this, just being extra careful because this is the last bit of the club that he's painting on. Doesn't want to mess up anything he's done, and metallics are pretty nasty for messing things up in my experience. Skeleton bones back out again, so he missed Mr. Troll's fingernails there, so he's painting those in the same colour as those skulls, and matte white just to dab in some eyeballs where his eyes are. Being extra careful there, making sure it's filled correctly. So that's the base coat done, and he's on to shading. So this is quite interesting. He's using a blue tone, so that's Army Painter's blue shade, and he's going to do the ash grey, all of his hair and his fur. So I don't think I'd have thought to do this, and I've looked at the card, and it does fit the artwork, and I think as soon as I saw it, I thought that's going to look good. You'll see by the end, you'll see how it looks, and what you guys might have a different opinion, but to me I thought this was quite an interesting point. I don't think I'd have done this, so it's quite nice having somebody else painting on the channel to sort of open my eyes to a different way of thinking. So let us know in the comments below, what would you have done? Would you have picked blue, and do you think it looks good by the end? So just let us know that. And this bit's quite a slow bit. Austin's taking his time. Obviously doesn't want any of this blue to run onto the Hydra, well, anything else, but mainly that skin, as it will look a little bit peculiar, the shaded blue skin under the arms. It'll look like he's dyed his hair and it's run into his skin, you know, if anybody else ever dyed their hair and gets a stained forehead. So he's switching over to a flesh wash. That's a lighter wash by the Army Painter, and that's to do all of his skin. So he's looking quite tanned suddenly, but once that's dried and sunk into the recesses, we'll be on to highlighting and bringing back up to a more natural colour after that. So have no fear, he will be back to normal shortly. So don't forget his face. That's very important when doing the skin, as always. Soft tone's the final shade that Austin's going to use, and that's going to be for everything else, and anything that we've not covered so far. So that's going to be the club, his horns, his skirt, and all of those bags that are wrapped around his waist. Oh, those skulls, don't forget those little skulls that look like tiny white bags at this distance. So just fill in all of those, making sure you get plenty of shade to fill in those recesses. The skirt's very, very good for, it's got very raised areas, so it's going to look fairly finished as soon as this dries, I thought, and you'll see in a moment's time. And just while we've got some more time, while that shade's happening, I'll just remind you, do leave us some comments below what you think about Austin's help on the channel, and give him a thumbs up if you're enjoying this paint job. So we're on to highlighting next, and we're going to start with ash grey. That's the same colour we use for the base, and we're going to be dry brushing that. So Austin uses a larger dry brush than me. I don't actually have a larger one by the Army Painter, but this model is big, as I've mentioned, and that's applying very, very well. So just dry brushing that ash grey across all of his hair and his furs, just again, and that's the hair and fur finished. Looks good already, at least I think so. I'm sure a lot of you do too. So we're on to highlighting the skin next. So we're just taking Barbarian Fesh, so that's the original base coat for the skin, and he's got his detail brush out, and he's just applying that to all of the raised parts of the Hydro's skin. So that's his sort of pec there, his big belly, the ribs that you can see through all the lines of flab that you've got. So that's all down one side, and I'll just skip forward. Same applies to the other side. It's just almost mirrored. Then he's going to be moving on to the arms, so he's getting his shoulder, the bit of shoulder that's poking out, is the top of his bicep that's sticking out. So both arms in the same way. This model sort of is quite well mirrored. The legs the same, so he's going to be highlighting, apologies, the top of his leg, and then some of the sort of calf that's sticking out, and then along his foot as well. So the top of his foot and each of his toes, as you can see there, and then that's just going to be mirrored onto the other side of the model. So just repeat the same process. Once that's done, you've got his hand to do. So that's all of the fingers, all of the bits that the light would be hitting. So make sure leaving plenty of shade in those recesses between his fingers, between his hand and the club that he's holding. They would be much darker. Make sure you get plenty on his knuckles. They'd be the lightest part where his skin's stretched. And then he's just going to turn the model around and work on the back, which is very similar to the front. He's just got some fat or muscles, however you want to take it, however you want to explain it. He's just painting the raised parts of each of those, and that'll be mirrored on the other side. Same as his hand. His other hand was very similar to the folded hand. Just paint back in his fingers and his knuckles and such like that. And once again, don't forget his face. On this model, his face is actually like the smallest part of his skin, so it's quite easy to forget. But here you'd be painting all the raised parts, so that's his forehead, his ears, tops of his ears especially, his nose, the point of his nose, and I would try and get his lips, and it looks like Austin's trying to do that as well. So you can see the Hydra's looking a lot more realistic now. This is Austin's final highlight. What I would have done, I think I'd have mixed in a lighter shade of skin and just picked out those points, so the tip of his nose, his lips, and the knuckles. I'd have done that with sort of 50% white mixed in with that Barbarian Fesh. Combat Fatigues is next, and that's just to paint back in the colour of the skirt. And as I said, while the shade was being applied, I think it sunk very easily into the recesses, so it already looks quite like naturally, it's just done it by itself, it's naturally highlighted and shaded it. But Austin's going to just add in some brighter highlights along all the raised parts, and there's plenty of raised bits on that skirt, and it's very easy to go and add in. Skeleton bones next up, and that's just to paint in his teeth there and re-highlight up his skulls, so he's got a few on his chest, and then that's his toenails as well, just painting the tips of all of those back in, and his fingernails as well, just try and catch the edges, make it look realistic as you can. Don't forget to do the front on those massive claws on that right hand of his. Boney Spikes mixed with 50% skeleton bone, so 50-50 of those two, and that's to highlight up his horns. So he's just sort of painting each, I guess they're like twisted horns, so each twist is highlighted back up. So I just showed you one quickly there, and just do the same for the second one. Monster Brown's out, and that's to just re-highlighting those straps on his club. So just applying a thin line down the middle of each one of those straps along his club there, and we'll also be spinning the model round and highlighting back up those satchels, those bags on his back that were originally painted in this Monster Brown. So for that, you just want to use your detail brush and just paint in a line along every edge of that bag, including the flap that opens it. Leather Brown's the next brown by the Army painter, so that's been quite helpful with Austin. He has used all of Army painters' paints during this whole thing, so that's made it a lot easier for me because I know most of them and I can say Army painter, and I don't have to look up how to say any crazy Citadel ones. Just a little dig at Benson there for making my life that marginally more difficult, but I do actually like the Citadel paints as a whole. Mouldy Clothes is next, and that's to just highlight back up that bag of marbles that he carries on his back. I mean, the Hydra was the marble champion of Massive Darkness, and that is on his CV, which is available from Simon on request. Oozing Purple was to highlight up those purple bags there. Matte White will be for his eyeballs, so just painting back in those whites of his eyes where the shader might have made it a little bit too dark. And then Hydra Turquoise is for the irises of the eyes, which I think are just a little bit too small for us to be able to see easily here. But Dead Black's the last one, which is definitely too small to see, and just to dot in two pupils on those irises. And like my models, he's also going to choose to paint the base of this one black, which is just a very simple way, which is easily changed later on if anybody chooses to do so. And that's the Hydra completely finished. And this is how Austin's going to rotate the model for us to see it, which is slightly more high-tech than how I would do it. So props to him for having a spinny thingy. and some space to set up some black background. So do let us know in the comments below what you thought of the model, what you thought of Austin doing the job, and if you'd like to see more from Austin. Let's give him some likes and get him to come back here, but he's also got his own channel if anybody wants to stray from my quality voiceovers. Thank you all very much for watching.